7:35 as the light dawns across southeast Louisiana. We are reminded that Jesus is the light. We're just diamonds in the rough. Sometimes really rough. Good to be with you.
A lot of the time. Let's get real, okay? A lot of the time. But we have somebody here this morning that's going to kind of illuminate some of this light for us, give us some hope. And that would be Dr. David Whidden. He's an assistant professor of theology at right here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Our Lady of the Lake College, author of several articles, peer-reviewed publications. But most importantly, he's here to talk with us today about his brand new book, available on Amazon and Kindle, Christ the Light, The Theology of Light and Illumination in Thomas Aquinas. Good morning, David.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Yeah, good to have you with us. David, the first question I guess I had to ask you is, sometimes we have so many metaphors in our language today, and so the concept of light in Christianity is definitely biblical. We know that, but is this just a outused metaphor?
It's a dead metaphor that I guess I'd like to say I'm trying to give a little CPR to. If you've ever been to the Easter Vigil, it's one of the most beautiful liturgical expressions.
Christ our light, right?
Right. This is, and we start in this beautiful dark church, and we slowly turn on lights, and the deacon and the priest say, Christ the light, Christ the light. And then when it's all over with, we turn off the lights, or turn on the lights again, and just go home to our illuminated world. So in many ways, light is a dead metaphor, but it's such a powerful one that was a large part of the church's history. If you went to any church today and said, finish this sentence, God is, most people say God is love.
Oh, right.
Which is great.
Which is true.
Which is absolutely
true.
I think if you went back 1,600 years ago and asked Christians to fill in the blank, God is, they'd just as be likely to say light as they would love.
And would that be because the light envelops you? I don't know.
Well,
the love envelops you? I don't know.
No. Part of it is because the world we live in now, we control light, right? We don't live in a world where darkness is something to be feared or where we come face to face with. We control dark. But you live in the world 1,600 years ago.
We kind of lost that.
We kind of lost that.
Strange.
It's a really powerful theme in Christianity that needs to be recovered. And so part of this project was to think about how can we actually improve our understanding of light in our time by looking at what Christians have done in the past.
Yeah, well, I know you did a lot of research on your dissertation, and you had three theses when you went into this, but the last one, from what I read, was a big surprise to you when you dug into it. Talk about that. Sure.
When I first started my research, I thought I would be talking about light with regard to God pretty generally, about how God brings light to us, illuminates us. It says in 1 John, right, God is light, there's no darkness in him. So this is the theological basis of that. But as I started doing research, everywhere in Aquinas that light showed up, Jesus showed up.
Oh.
And I initially expected just to have a chapter at the end on Christ as being the light, but everywhere when it comes to our very ability to think about God, it's Christ who gives us the light that allows us to do that. In our language about God, it's Christ who changes our ability to talk about God, illuminates our language. In knowing what to do, what's right, it's Christ who illuminates our path in knowing the right things to do and leading us towards God. So Christ is everywhere that there's light. This is what Aquinas calls the divine mission of the Son, which is to illuminate our minds with regard to God.
Okay. Yeah, so the person of Jesus, that mission of Jesus you saw is so intricately tied to really understanding and to make practical, I would assume.
Absolutely. It's just such a key idea in both Aquinas and in Christianity that Christ is the one who brings light to us. It's actually very different than what you get in kind of modern philosophy and the Enlightenment. So when the modern Enlightenment started, the idea was that you could think for yourself, that you could be your own light.
Right.
And what Aquinas and the Church has said for a long time is you have some light to yourself, but it's God who really gives you the light that you need to know who God is, what your life is, where your life is from, what your life is for. It's God who provides that kind of light for us.
Wow. Well, we're speaking this morning with Dr. David Whidden, professor of theology at Our Lady of the Lake College in Baton Rouge. And I've got another question for you. So, in your new book, Christ the Light, you present three theses, because this is your research, right?
Right.
The third, So actually, you know what I really want to ask you? is how we can, based upon that particular question, how we can reinstitute or incorporate Aquinas' concepts on the theology of light in our faith today. Because as you just said, we kind of lost that metaphor of light where we could be our own light. It sounds like the lie of the garden, like we'll be on our own gods, right? Well, that's not what St. Thomas Aquinas tells us. So can you talk a little bit about light in terms of our faith today?
Part of it is just paying attention.
That's easy enough, huh?
Well, no,
Maybe.
actually. Depends on how old your kids are when you go to Mass.
Yeah.
But in fact, if you begin to look and listen to what we say on Sundays and in our daily Masses and look at the symbols that are there, you'll see light show up all over the place. And begin to think then twofold. One, about how God brings light to us. So your prayer that you opened up this morning with of God saving us, right? Well, one of the ways that God saves us is by giving us light so that we know where to go. He illuminates our paths. So one can think about that in one's prayer life and praying for light and to be a light. I mean, one of the interesting things about Aquinas is he thinks that God gives us light so that we can be light for others. And this is the idea that, of course, you get in Matthew of not hiding your light under a bushel.
Right.
So the idea is that when we act in love, when we do acts of mercy, acts of love for other people, we can actually we participate in God's light, God's love, and then become light for other people. And
that teaching that you're expressing is beautifully illuminated, if you will, in the Easter Vigil when the Paschal candle comes in, and one by one, people's candles are lit, and from a pitch black church, the whole church is illuminated. And I think that expresses that so beautifully within a liturgy.
Exactly. And what's so beautiful about that is any one light never seems to be sufficient. But when you take a whole church and have everybody holding a candle and holding a light, all of a sudden you have this great flame of love. And
as physical as that is, you conclude the book very powerfully with this illumination of the light with the Eucharist. Talk about that, because in a sense that brings a bit together the physical world and the spiritual, but they're not so separate necessarily.
No, in fact, the physical world is really a manifestation of the spiritual world. It's the spiritual light that, if you will, begins with everything, and it's the physical light then is kind of a reflection on that. So it kind of goes from spiritual to physical instead of physical to spiritual. But in the Eucharist, when the priest holds up the host, and here's Christ, in some sense, he's illuminating the idea that Christ is continuing to be the light for us. Right? When we take Christ into our bodies, we bring the light of Christ into us, which again allows us to become lights for other people as well. So it's a way of thinking about the Eucharist as something that one receives as a gift. A light that one receives.
Yeah, we don't take the Eucharist, we receive.
Right.
We receive the light.
Right, exactly.
I always found that interesting. One day I realized I'm looking up there and they're holding up the chalice, and you can see our faces on the reflection off that chalice. Anyway, but this is where it becomes real. This isn't just theology or abstract. This is very day-to-day stuff.
Well, it should be. And this is, again, part of why I'm trying to do CPR on the theology of light, because the metaphor has really been lost.
Well, I wonder if you have any plans, because this is, in our last minute here, people need to, first of all, get your book on Amazon and Kindle, right? Those are the two places. It's called Christ the Light. Barnes & Noble. How about that? The Theology of Light and Illumination in Thomas Aquinas. Can be a little bit heady for us. I'm wondering if you're going to be blogging for those of us who need simple, providing a little light there. Maybe we can put a challenge out to you to do that, Dr. David Whidden.
Thank you very much.
In your spare time.
Exactly. I've got a couple of other projects in Aquinas I'm working on, but that maybe one day I can find some time to do that.
Yeah, well, we need some St. Thomas. We need some Christ the Light in the words of St. Thomas Aquinas in our life.
I do find it powerful that you're a professor there at Our Lady of the Lake College, and if anywhere where the light of Christ meets humanity, it's there in the medical profession where all that kind of comes together. Do you see that in your...
In fact, I very much try and get my students to think about themselves as bringing healing and light to those around them. And since we're the only Catholic college north of New Orleans and Louisiana, we like to think of ourselves as kind of a light in the middle of Louisiana.
Amen. Well,
Thank
God
you.
bless you, Dr. David Whidden. Thank
Thanks
you
for
so
having
much for being with us today.